The city of Minneapolis is considering a regulation that would force landlords to offer their property for sale to the tenant first, but the tenant would be allowed to offer that same sale to any third party they choose. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over what they call the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act up in Minneapolis, right? And this is something that has been implemented in other parts of the country, usually in very progressive, very anti-landlord places, okay? So it shouldn't surprise you that this is coming out of Minneapolis. Obviously, Minnesota has gotten very far, it's gone very far to the left, okay? That's just the truth. So, yeah, what this law does is it makes it so that the landlord, if they decide they want to sell their property, they have to offer it up for sale to the tenant first. Now, what the belief of the people who want to put these laws in place is that this will allow the tenant to not lose their home if in case the landlord decides they want to get completely out of the rental business and not suddenly face a huge rent increase either. Okay? But the truth of the matter is that the reason that the majority of renters are renters is because they are not financially capable of purchasing a house. So this law or regulation won't help a lot of people. But the other thing it does is it completely screws over, regular contract law in terms of, buying and selling your property, okay? It completely screws a landlord over, takes away their property rights of being able to sell their property to whom they choose. Just as an example, imagine that you are a landlord, you own this single family house where you have a renter living in it right now, right? And you decide, hey, I want to give this house to my son so that him and his family can move in there. Well, you can't do that. You can't sell that house to your son because guess what? Your tenant, the renter who's living in there, they actually have the right to purchase the property before your son does. Okay, so you cannot sell that property to your son. And if the tenant can't afford to buy the property, they can assign the sale over to a third party, anyone they choose, according to this regulation that they're considering. Okay, that means that if the tenant says, "Oh, well, I personally can't buy it, but my cousin Bertha, she can, so I'm gonna have her buy the house instead." No, okay. You're messing with landlords' property rights. You're completely screwing us over. And these rules and regulations aren't going to actually help tenants be able to purchase homes in 99.9% of situations. Yeah, there might be one or two cases where this works, but those people could have bought a house on their own in the first place, okay? And they didn't need the landlord in order to do that. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what do you think about this sort of law, okay? The one that allows tenants to have the first right of refusal when it comes to buying a property if a landlord decides to put it up for sale. Okay, I mean, do they have something like this where you're at? I know I've heard that, I believe Washington, D.C. has a law like this. I'm sure that they have something like this in California. I mean, obviously, that's the most progressive anti-landlord place in the entire country. So I'm sure there's places in California where this is true as well. But, what do you think of it? Now, this article is actually coming from a publication that I personally don't like because it is so progressive, so far left, but it's motherjones.com, and it has a huge human interest part story in here, and I'm just going to skip over all of that because I'm more interested in the details of the law and what it says and giving you my opinion of that. So, yeah, this is coming from motherjones.com. The article says, "Will Minneapolis pass a law that helps renters buy their homes? Advocates see the fight as a chance to stop developers from displacing residents." So, yeah, let me skip down to the parts that are of interest to me because I'm not really interested in this sad story, whatever, that they're trying to put in here first to try to garner sympathy. I'm more interested in the facts, okay? Okay, it says, and I'm going to start off with a, kind of in the middle here. And this is from a tenant who, basically is complaining about the situation that they say that developers are coming in and buying up properties and selling them. So in North Minneapolis, developers come into our community, they buy up these homes, they do patchwork, they get tenants in, and then they sell it for more money, says Anderson, a lifelong Twin Cities resident. They don't give back to our community. While Anderson never really considered herself a political activist, as her anger with her landlord grew, so did her inclination to do something. Together with the local nonprofit United Renters for Justice, Anderson began lobbying for the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA, a proposed ordinance under city council consideration that she believes would help prevent companies like Havenbrook from buying and neglecting the city's dwindling supply of affordable housing. So here's the thing, okay? When a real estate investor comes into a rundown area, and this could be in any major city, this isn't just in Minneapolis, but what happens a lot of the times is that real estate investors such as myself, landlords, house flippers, etc., they will go into an area and they will see that, hey, there's a whole lot of rundown housing stock in here. So we're going to fix this housing stock up and it will bring the value of that house up. Okay, we're going to modernize it. We're going to make it nicer. And then some of them, they sell them. People like me, I hold on to those properties. I just refinance them and then pull my money back out, But the end result is that the whole neighborhood gets nicer because you have nicer housing in it. And, that I personally don't see a problem with it. But a lot of these, tenant rights people, they say, well, they're driving up the price of housing by doing it. And then they claim that, we're doing cheap fixes and all that. But, that's not the way that the grand majority of us are doing it, okay? There's a very small percentage, and I always say this, there's a very small percentage of bad actors out there. And, they make up less than 1% of everyone else, okay? And they come in and they're, doing stuff that, might or might not be, morally justifiable. However, the grand majority of us, we're just out here, we're trying to make some money, and we're bringing the neighborhoods up at the same time by making the housing nicer, cleaning the area up, removing the blight. So just as an example, I bought a house in the Benson neighborhood here in Omaha, right? And I fixed it up. I made it really nice on the inside. It had a whole bunch of, in the yard, had a whole bunch of trees that were overgrown, it was a complete utter mess, right? And I cleaned it up. I made it look nice and I fixed it up on the inside. And now I charge like $1,300 a month rent for this house. Okay. Meanwhile, the previously, before you fixed it up, you probably couldn't have gotten $1,000 a month. Now they could come at me and say, oh, well, see, look, you drove up those prices. And I'm like, yeah, but look at how much money I invested in it. Look what I did. I made the whole neighborhood look nicer by, cutting down all them ugly trees and overgrown plants and keeping the house nice looking. And I made it modern and updated on the inside. And now the place actually is worth $1,300 a month because that's what all the other rental houses in the entire area are charging. Now, what they want you to do is, keep the house crappy, keep it overgrown so that it's cheap so that these people can continue to live there for cheap. That's stupid, okay? Well, all you end up with is an area that's run down and trashy and looks like garbage, okay? And I don't think that the people in that area truly want that. I don't think that's good for the tenants, and I know it's not good for the city, okay? So, yeah, I personally have no problem with house flippers or real estate investors or landlords coming in and fixing up the housing stock. Now, just because, here's the other issue I have, right? If you see a problem with it, why don't you step in there and actually fix up the housing stock and then offer it for super cheap yourself? You don't do it because you can't do it, okay? You can't go in there and then spend thousands and thousands of dollars and, run this business at a loss. It just doesn't work. the only way that it can be done is by being a for-profit business. Oh man, it's very frustrating whenever I read some of the comments from tenants, because they just don't understand how business works. They don't understand how finances work. They don't understand money. They think that, everything could be paid for by the government or through some non-profit. And the truth of the matter is that private landlords and private real estate investors, we're the ones who are making the huge improvements to areas, and we're the ones who are truly bringing these areas up. The government can't do all the things that individual investors are doing out there. TOPA, and now we're going to go into the details of what TOPA would entail, and this is the interesting part right here. TOPA would require many property owners to notify tenants in writing of plans to sell their building and give them the right of first refusal to purchase it. For tenants who can't afford to buy their home, the policy would allow them to assign their purchasing rights to a third party vetted by the city, ostensibly reducing the likelihood of a slumlord or hedge fund swooping in to buy it. So they would be able to assign their rights to somebody approved by the city. Okay, so that would basically take the landlord's ability to sell a property away completely. That is ridiculous. And how does, they're like, oh, well, the city, that will prevent a slumlord or a hedge fund from buying it. First of all, the hedge funds are not doing a bad job, okay? Yeah, I mean, there's growing pains, obviously, with some of them, but the hedge funds will come in, they will keep the properties in good shape, they have good property management, and they run a pretty streamlined business. So I think the problem they have is that the hedge funds are a little bit too efficient. Because their rents are right at the market rate, and they believe that housing should be less than the market rate. Well, if the government wants to subsidize housing, they need to throw out some subsidies to the private property owners. They don't need to punish us. That's what they seem to be trying to do. So I mean, I'm not in favor of this kind of TOPA stuff or whatever it is. Okay, so let me skip down a little bit more in this article here. While not as widely known a policy as rent control, similar opportunity to purchase bills have cropped up in jurisdictions across the country as deepening socioeconomic inequality puts wider home ownership out of reach. In 1980, Washington, D.C. was the first city to pass such a law, which remains a national blueprint. A local think tank found that between 2002 and 2012, the policy helped keep an estimated 1,400 units more affordable. Legislators in at least 10 jurisdictions have since enacted some kind of opportunity to purchase reform, including Chicago and San Francisco. Some of those policies, like San Francisco's, only give the right of first refusal to qualified nonprofit housing developers for multi-unit apartments. Others, like the one passed in Minnesota in 1991, apply solely to residents of manufactured home parks. In Minneapolis, the measure would apply to most property owners with more than 5 units. Berkeley, California, and New York State are currently considering similar opportunity to purchase laws. Yeah, the reason that more of these laws haven't passed is because they don't work, okay? Because they're not popular, because they take away people's property rights, and they're just complete garbage. So, I mean, I've heard already nightmare stories of things that have happened to landlords in Washington, D.C. because of laws like this, okay? And obviously Washington, D.C. is extremely expensive. The property there is extremely expensive. The rents there are extremely high. This stuff didn't help anything, okay? If it helped, then why is it that, the property isn't cheaper? Why is it that the rents are still super high? Well, it only helped a few people, and that's it. So in the end, a law or regulation like this, all it did was take away the property rights from, landlords who could have done what they wanted to do with their properties. And that's why I don't agree with it.